Okay, good evening. I'd like to officially call the May 14th meeting of the Lane Community College Budget Committee to order. Thank you, everyone, for being here as we continue our work on the budget. Celia, would you please call roll?
Yes, Kevin Alltucker.
Here.
Denise Diamond.
All right, here.
Larissa Ennis.
Here.
Austin Volnegi.
Here.
Sophie Gibson. Will Gray. Dan Isaacson.
Present. Here.
Charles Kimball.
Here.
Steve Mattel.
Here.
Zach Mulholland.
Here.
Amber Patterson.
Here.
Ron Preisler.
Here.
Julie Weisman.
Here.
Jesse Williams.
Here.
Thank you. Jesse will begin the meeting with reading the land recognition.
We acknowledge that we are on the traditional homelands of the Kalapuya people. The Kalapuya were the stewards of this very land for over 14,000 years before their traditional way of life was forever disrupted. We start our meeting with humility and reverence for the original inhabitants, the Kalapuya.
Thank you. We'll now move on to the approval of the May 14th committee agenda and the May 7th meeting minutes. Are there any changes or corrections to the minutes? Do I have a motion to approve both as presented?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving tonight's agenda and May 7th meeting minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carried. All right, we'll now be moving on to public comment. The board may not respond directly to any issues raised during the public comment, but will refer those to President Bolger for appropriate action. Celia, do we have any public comment this evening?
Yes, we have Jim Arnold, followed by Adrian Mitchell.
Am I on? That's great. Chair Patterson, members of the Budget Committee, President Bolger, colleagues and friends, good evening. My name is Jim Arnold. Some of you know me, but for those who don't, I'm a former university and community college administrator. In retirement, I've remained involved in higher education, including part-time faculty and classified roles here at LCC. I also served on the Budget Development Subcommittee here during the 21-22 academic year. I come before you tonight to share a few brief observations, pose some questions, and to make a recommendation. From what I understand, this year's Budget Development Subcommittee, made up of faculty, classified professionals, and administrators, engaged in what's been described as an extremely collaborative shared governance process. Their final product was a balanced budget approved by the College Council last month that included a surplus of around $600,000. Then, last Wednesday, here in this room, the administration presented its version of a budget, which surprisingly looked quite different. This proposal called for spending $3.1 million from the ending fund balance. If adopted, it would deplete the college's reserves over the next few years and place the institution in a financially precarious position. This shift is concerning. The BDS proposal assumed hiring 30 of 37 open positions, about 80%, leaving a reasonable number vacant. But the administration's proposal shows significantly higher staffing levels. According to the LCC HR office, current staffing is 189 faculty, 281 classified staff, and 70 managers. The administration now projects 207 faculty, 337 classified, and 80 managers. That's 84 more positions than we have now, and more than twice the number the BDS proposed to fill. I'm left wondering, where did these positions come from? Why are they now in the budget? And if the goal is to fill them this coming year, how does that make fiscal sense when it would lead to a multi-million-dollar deficit? So it seems we have two competing proposed budgets based largely on different assumptions about staffing. I'm unsure about which one to trust, but drawing on my experience here, I'm inclined to support the thoughtful, deliberate work of the Budget Development Subcommittee. I urge you to ask, why wasn't a projected $3.1 million deficit shared with the board, budget committee, and campus community before last week? And finally, I strongly recommend that you request a revised proposal, one that's balanced without relying on reserves, that takes a more thoughtful, responsible approach to filling vacant positions. Thanks so much.
Adrian Mitchell. Good evening, President Bulger and members of the Budget Committee. I prepared a memo which I have sent to you all, and I believe it's posted on board docs. I did bring a few paper copies, which I'll share with those of you who are here in the room. My name is Adrian Mitchell, and I'm a long-term employee at LCC. I have also served on the Budget Development Subcommittee for 13 years and as chair or co-chair for several budget cycles. And I have several concerns that I'd like to share about the proposed budget. Namely, the $3.1 million usage of ending fund balance is very concerning and not in compliance with board policy. Fortunately, we don't think that this is necessary because we believe it is possible to balance the budget in a responsible manner without utilizing all of those funds from the ending fund balance. So one of the things that our collaborative process achieved was a balanced budget, and it was approved unanimously by all of the members of the Budget Development Subcommittee and the College Council. And we were very surprised to see the dramatically changed budget that was released last week. A few of the items that I wanted to share with you are, first of all, the overarching recommendation that a new proposal be presented that is balanced, that does not rely on the use of the ending fund balance, and that is transparent in that it clearly identifies any increases or proposed reductions. And I would recommend that you take a look at the beginning fund balance for the general fund. There were several different figures presented last week with a $1 million variance on those figures that were all presented on the same day. Review also, I would recommend reviewing also the OPE expenses, which are projected to increase by $5.5 million from actuals projected for this year to next year, which is an 18% increase when the most recent document posted on board docs today shows a 4.4% increase in staffing levels. In addition, I would recommend taking a look at the personnel vacancy rate, which is typically budgeted at 2.5%. And it has been changed apparently in the proposed budget document to 1.5%. And that has a net impact of more than $900,000 negatively on the budget, as well as the underutilization rate. Furthermore, you heard from Jim Arnold, who has a lot of experience both in the budget and in higher education, about the changes to positions and staffing levels for next year, which contribute to this budget deficit. And I would encourage you to examine the document that was posted on board docs by the administration today with all of the staffing levels for each employee group, which shows a 10% increase in management positions that are included in the budget for next year. We have already received just yesterday a retrenchment notice for one position of a faculty member, and we don't think that budget cuts should be necessary when the proposed budget is creating that deficit by increasing staffing levels, creating new positions that had not previously existed, including the 10% increase in management positions. And then I did include in my memo a number of more long-term recommendations with a number of links, which I won't go over in great detail, But we do hope in the future that we will be able to receive an audit in a manner that is consistent with Oregon Public budget law so that it is timely, and that there will be monthly presentations of budget to actual to the Board of Education so that this kind of information can be presented on a regular basis, as well as documentation throughout the budget development process that the board has access to and the campus community, because within the budget development subcommittee, we actually had a lot of information, significantly, substantially more information than has been presented publicly to the board. So thank you so much for your consideration and for your volunteer service, and I'll share a paper copy of the memo.
That's all. All right, thank you to everyone who provided testimony. That is the conclusion of the public comment period. So our next item on the agenda is information review and discussion. We'll begin with the responses to information requests from our previous meeting. President Bolger, would you please introduce the speakers of this item?
Yes, I'd be happy to. And before I do that, that's going to be Jonathan Campbell and Kara Flack. But before I do that, I just want to appreciate the time that you're taking to be on the Budget Committee. Really, really appreciate you giving up your time and your talents to be able to help us with this process. I also want to acknowledge that since we met last time at the request of the co-chair of the Budget Development Subcommittee and president of our faculty union also, I authorized the creation of an email address. It's called Budget Committee, I think at lanecc.edu, something like that. And the purpose of that was to provide a straightforward channel for sharing input, because we appreciate the input, we appreciate collaboration. We value transparency and we value open communication. Since that time, I've received some feedback from Budget Committee members. And so we have a few interests in making sure that we are following public meetings laws and with respect to this public meeting for the Budget Committee, but and also the roles and responsibilities of the Budget Committee, because as we know, the Budget Committee is not the Board of Education. And so how we're going to move forward is that we're going to ask that any information that is shared to be shared with Celia Wright, who's our board liaison and executive assistant to the president. And we'll make sure that the Budget Committee certainly receives all of that information. And thank you so much for having it put in public comment, because we want to make sure that that is done as well. It's a matter of public record. So this is all in the interest of transparency and a fully informed process. And we always appreciate the collaboration that we have with all of the constituents in the college. So thank you for that. And Rowan, thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to turn it over now to Kara Flack and to Vice President of Finance and Operations to get us started. And they will also address anything in your questions related to the document in public comment now that you have received. They'll certainly address any of your questions that you may have with respect to that too. So Kara?
Thanks. Thank you everyone for being here and members of the audience. I wanted to start off with a couple of comments and then get into this. There is fundamentally two things that are also happening when you look at financial pictures. And this is something Jonathan will go through. So we have a financial forecast, which is separate from how we're budgeting. So there are certain areas that you forecast, such as vacancy savings and all those that will affect what you project to be spending. So we have those set of numbers which give a different financial picture than balancing a budget with all. So what you do when you establish the budget, you assume all your positions are full. As you go through the year, you achieve vacancy savings, or as the college has called it, a swirl. So if anybody has any historical experience in that, we're trying to get rid of that, but it's in there. So that's just one concept of where you will see those, where the budget appears like it's spending 3.1 million more than the ending fund balance. We know as we forecast, it's going to we're anticipating it looks more like 1.8 million. So that's also where, if you watched any of our board, like the third quarter financial update, what we're seeing is on a trend, if we continue on the path we're on, we are depleting all our resources, all of our ending fund balances within 2 or 3 years. So we're aware of that picture. And that's, you know, the comments you're hearing where we are depleting our ending fund balance. We're going through that. That scenario is on the horizon. So that's where we have to take the time to look at these budgets thoughtfully, make educated and reasonable strategic decisions to impact that picture as much as possible. So that you see kind of separate with the budget. So we budget what we know we have today, and then we move forward with what we expect to spend. So they're kind of two paths. So keep that in mind as we move through this. So I'll head into the budget committee. I know we're on a limited amount of time. So if we go to the next page. When we sat down to start develop the budget, we had guiding principles. The president, cabinet, executive cabinet all sits down and develops what we believe are the literally the guiding principles, and this is in your budget document. But I want to highlight, you know, the president's 3 goals, which is what we really use to go through all these: fiscal health, enrollment growth, and then the institutional climate and culture. Those are really important as we move through these. We keep a student focus, keeping educational opportunities forward, and then we are looking at efficiencies, reducing costs, and how we can do mission critical functions. So keep those principles in mind as you continue to look through at this budget. Next page. One thing we really wanted to emphasize, the committee roles and responsibilities. One thing to keep in mind is operational decisions are done through the president and through the path of that. But as a budget committee, what you should focus on, making sure that you recommend any changes, you're looking at the overall budget, you're asking questions, we're providing a transparent process, which is what our goal is, and that we align the college needs with our institutional goals, and that we have a long-term sustainability plan and we have financial planning. So those are areas to keep in mind. What is under the purview of the president is operational decisions, staffing, mandating the inclusion of line items, directing college operations. So all administrative policy decisions are done at the board level. Administrative, operational are done through the president. This is where I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan. He's got great information after this.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for having me again. So we got a lot of really good questions, 30 to 40 questions. So I appreciate everyone's engagement, thoughtfulness, sending us lots of questions, giving me more work. So it's, I'm here for y'all. What I tried to do,
Got it.
what I tried to do is answer everyone's questions individually as best I can, but in the thoughtfulness of time, what I did was compact them into themes that I saw. And so there's a few different themes that we'll go through. So there were a lot of questions swirling around personnel costs, headcounts, FTEs by positions. And so with that in mind, what I tried to do is put together some information here within the information request. I'll talk through it. We can ask questions once we get to the end of the presentation. I'll ask that let me get through it because I might answer some of your questions first. So the way that we budget for, I'm going to focus on faculty first because there's a lot of questions about faculty. There's a little bit of difference I want to point out first between headcounts, which is what you see on the screen here, and FTE. And so FTE being I could work 40 hours a week, but that would mean I'm a full-time FTE. I work 75 or 30 hours a week, I'm 75%, right? So we look at these different numbers. So I just want to point out that what you're seeing on the screen here, what's in the budget document more refers to headcount. So actual person that's in the job. The reason that we've consistently over the last few years budgeted faculty at the rate that we do is for a few different reasons. I'll kind of go through these bullets here. One is there's a bargain agreement that we have a 60% full-time contracted faculty throughout the year. I don't know the exact specifics. We take a snapshot in time. We have to have 60% of our faculty staff being full-time. So we lovingly refer to that as the faculty floor because we have to make sure we're in compliance with that agreement. It's been around, was new to the current agreement. So I think it was established in 2020. So that's kind of something you've seen us do consistently over the last couple of years. Right now, the upcoming faculty floor is, I think, about 186. It's been historically, since this has been included, 185 to 187. Like I said, we've consistently, over the last few years, put in 200 faculty counts to make sure we meet that floor. It takes a lot longer to hire a faculty member because they're so specialized. We have programs that are coming online. We have to consider resignations and retirements, reassignment time and whatnot. So when we do this, it gives us the flexibility to hire, considering these timelines, considering these program growth areas, and all the things that I just mentioned. When we talk about cost impact or cost containment, cost escalation, these are financial words, but we know that we have about 95 positions that faculty members that are at the top step. With FY26, we have 11 more that are coming up that'll be at that top pay grade, being paid well for what they do well, right? On the bottom right-hand side, my right, your left, I believe, you'll see kind of comparisons, just cost comparisons for each position, each position type, talking about, we tried to get apples to apples. So when managers and classified are brought onto LCC, we have what's the contract hours, so 260 hours, 260 days working a year. Faculty is 174. So you can see here the different pay rates. We can go to the next slide. So there's about 4.4% in position growth budgeted. Like Kara said, there's a difference between what we forecast and what we budget. In Oregon budget law, we don't have a specific line item that's for vacancy savings. That's set aside for a different lens when we look at where we think we're going to land in our forecast. For a budget, we budget each individual person or each individual position. And when we say, in theory, we're going to hire all these positions, we know that's not going to be true. So we have to keep in mind our program growth. 4.4 in position growth reflects us targeting areas that have growth right now. So we know that aviation is growing. We know that we have respiratory therapy coming online, which is supported by our community partners at PeaceHealth. We have about 9.7% in salary cost growth because of those cost impact factors that I mentioned before. People at the top step, more people being paid that's coming online. We're trying to, we can contribute some of that to enrollment growth. We have currently 35 vacancies across the board. 15 of them are faculty. The other 15 is classified in one management position, which is the AVP for Culture and Belonging, which is an ongoing search. That's pretty standard for this time of year. It fluctuates as the year goes on, gets bigger as we come to the term because we're hiring faculty, we're hiring more people. We know people are retiring. On average, there's 20 to 40 vacant positions at any given time at the college because of those reasons. Flip the page. So, Kara gave forecast, a presentation for Q3 using Q3 data after the last budget hearing. So what I'll sum that up to is we usually, in terms of growth, we are outpacing our revenue growth projected, and that could change, right? We get different inputs every day by about 2%. Our expenses are going up by about 4 to 6%. Revenues going up at anywhere from 3 to 5%. So spending more than you earn is kind of how we say it in simple nutshell terms. What that does for us in the long term is we dip into our carry forward. We start using more of our reserves, and by FY 28, 29, we've depleted our reserves given the current plan. You can go to the next slide. So this budget represents a lot of work that we've already put into this. The process has an internal phase where we start back in October and we start planning with all the faculty and staff, all the deans and directors, all the project coordinators trying to put together a plan. costing on our programs that are coming up. So when we talk about work that's done internally, taking a snapshot in time, which is our FY26 budget proposal, this is our starting point. We continue to plan in the coming year to make adjustments as we go. And what we've come up with is that in the current cycle, inward facing, we've already governed back our growth in expenses to the tune of $2.7 million. That's the list of things that we adjusted before we even got in front of you. In order to make ends meet, in order with the current assumptions, we have to continue to pull back each year perpetually because of our escalating growth in areas like salary, inflation, cost for us to do business. That's about 3.2 million year over year. We've already done 2.7 million for this coming year in the current inward facing cycle. So that means after we pass this budget, we would have to continue to look at revenue assumptions, continue to look at our programming, and find another $1 million to hold in the budget afterwards. Oregon budget law gives us the opportunity to adjust our budget throughout the year. So we would be able to reevaluate, come to the board with new assumptions, come to you with higher level strategic concepts, and eventually make adjustments as we go. But this budget, as you see it, is our starting point. It's our foundation for us to continue looking at it strategically from as we move on through the year. So I'm a little bit of a helper 10, as Kara likes to call it. I'm a helper. I like to do this collaboratively. I like to joke that you can't do algebra alone, right? We're solving for X, and the variables to solve for X continue to change day after day. I joke that it's also why I have a job, right? I get to do the variables every day. But it's fun, and I like the collaborative process. I enjoy working with BDS and my colleagues there, cabinet, deans and directors. We meet all the time to talk about assumptions that we see. We have the May economic forecast, which just came out, which is a new input that we'll continue to analyze. It, in a nutshell, drops. It was downgraded by about 2%. So that's the tune of, Austin can speak to it better than I can.
About 70 million.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have a downgrade, which we don't know yet what the downhill effects are. We'll continue to look at it, look for the budget, which is in legislation right now.
Yeah.
I'm committed. My team is committed. To continuing to improve, right? We're still new to LCC. We're still new to this community. We have a lot of new partners with our students. We have a lot of new faces that we're continuing to get better. Jesse pointed out some great comments about making sure that we're consistent with the terminology, making sure our graphs are clear. I have crazy concepts in my head of how to make the budget document more readable, which we'll get better at that too. But what I will say is that we've put a lot of work into this, and even after we meet with our friends and our colleagues, we do it in snapshots. It's an iterative process. Assumptions continue to change even after we have College Council help us review a government like the budget that we present to them, and we do the best we can. So go to the next slide. With that, what comes next? Continuing to forecast. I keep forgetting to bring my crystal ball with me. I literally have a crystal ball in my office. It's the favorite part, my most favorite part of the job. We continue to seek input from our partners, internal and external, which I love hearing feedback. Collaborative refinement, continuing to make sure that our assumptions are correct. We can't solve for X in a silo. We got to do it together. And make sure that we're structurally balanced, that it's not just taking a snapshot in time and making a decision, but that it's iterative, it's dynamic. We continue to do it every day, and that we're doing it the best we can. Next slide. So next meeting, the goal is hopefully to pass an approved budget recommendation. And with your input, your advice, with your wisdom and expertise. And with that, that's the end of my slides. I decided to include a picture of the open house event.
We'll certainly take any questions on the responses to information requests. If you've got questions on that, I know Jonathan and Kara would be happy to answer those.
Zach's got his hands up.
Jesse's going to help me keep an eye on everybody who
Zach first?
wants to speak so we get in appropriate order. And Zach, I saw your hand pop up first.
We go to the slide with the identified reductions. Can you just walk us through each of those and describe in a little more detail each of those for us, please?
Sure. So position holds, this is a combination of us looking at what was presented as recommendations for hires across the board, not just looking at what's current, but also what was asked for, if you will. So there's a process by which the deans submit requests for new faculty members. And it's not just to replace those that are retiring or being reassigned, but also in growth areas. I mentioned aviation, they're growing like crazy out there. Comms, they have a constantly have a wait list. So what we did is this is a combination of looking at what was asked for and saying, not right now, let's hold on to that. Let's wait and see what happens. The sunset of the program is a program that was has one student. It was already evaluated, and there was already discussion for it to move out. Reduction in capital outlay. We talked about that a little bit last time. We wanted to increase what we kick to deferred maintenance, to IT for cybersecurity and so on. We're going to roll it forward at just a slightly reduced level from what we normally do, and we've kind of stretched out our timeline for some things like computer replacement, printers, and so on. Our IT director is working hard to make sure that we can still work within the confines. There's a lot of pressure there. We reduced outside contracts, and a big chunk of that is looking at redundancies with current software that we have. So we have a lot of things that do very similar things, and it's kind of grown over time. And now we're going to take a closer look at what we have and see what we can do more with and overlapping and whatnot. Private funding is in the grants realm. So we're talking about programs that are, and actually, I can't remember off the top of my head. Peace Health?
The $1 million donation.
Right.
Yeah.
That one's actually an increase. So Peace Health kicked an extra 300,000. Thank you, Kara. My phone a friend on this one. The reduction of part-time budgets. So that one is more making sure that we live within our means. We're still increasing the part-time budgets, but we're not going to increase it as much as we normally do, because we're hoping that with enrollment kind of leveling out, we have a better handle on internal considerations and a better process for it. We won't overrun it as much. And then, like I said, in August, this budget is a foundation. It's the starting point. So we'll have to come back to the table in August and operationally look at the $1 million in elsewhere that we still need to find the hold.
Thank you.
Austin.
Austin.
Yeah. Austin, Julie.
Then Julie.
Fantastic. Well, now the Peace Health one, because actually, I have probably information request questions and non-information request questions. I'll put the Peace Health one in that category of non-information request one. But in regards to like just the dynamics here, so what I'm kind of like experiencing is, okay, so we have these positions, these FTEs that we want to fill and so forth. There's a cost to getting the full amount of FTE there and so forth. But we're also through our public comment here, a comment about retrenchment, and which is not necessarily a layoff, but it is a process that through the contract to have those conversations. So it feels a little contradictory here, I guess, to have like, we need to get this positions filled. There's a cost to it, multi-million-dollar cost to it. So I'm trying to reconcile that as like, okay, how can, so why don't we just keep like even like half of those positions not filled? Why are we budgeting for the full amount of positions there? I still haven't gotten clarity on that, and I would love to get that clarity. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Looking at both of us, so I'm
Yeah,
deferring.
totally.
I'll start and then you can. So think of it this way. We have people in the seat doing a job.
Yep.
We have lots of really great programs, so on. We also have programs that are growing.
Sure.
So they're trying to consider, how do I grow? How do I keep up with enrollment? How do I keep doing the job? How do I make Peace Health work with the program?
Yep.
So with people currently in the job and considering strategic hires that we need to make in order to make these programs happen, keep up with enrollment, keep our momentum with enrollment, serve the community, we have to kind of balance both. So in order to get to the level of numbers that were talked about in public comment, we'd have to do a hiring freeze of the 35-ish positions we have, and then actually impact 50 other jobs with people currently in the seat. So it's a balance where like the FY26 budget is our starting place.
Yeah.
And then we have to continue to evaluate and strategically look at hires, people in jobs, programs that are growing, and look at retirements, reassignment time and whatnot. But we can't necessarily in our budget by Oregon budget law just remove those positions. We have to account for it in our forecast, which is a slightly different lens. So I'll look to see if I.
Okay. No, go ahead.
Yeah, and as Jonathan's saying, it's strategically a little different. So the retrenchment is a different type of position than aviation. So aviation's growing without instructors, managers to grow that program. The program doesn't grow. So one of the, if I just pick on a faculty position, we have a business faculty position, but we're also expanding the bachelor's program. We have health professions positions because we're expanding a bachelor's of nursing. So we can't expand that program if we don't bring those staff in. But the particular, if you use the retrenchment example, that position, in order to keep the funding to move to these other areas, you have to make those strategic decisions. And those are what some of the decisions that this college is going to have to be faced with. And we hope it's a collective discussion of how do we make these tough strategic decisions impact that financial forecast that I keep talking about, and still keep strategically growing in the areas that we need to grow to keep students coming at the college.
Gotcha.
If that helps.
Absolutely. I do have a brief follow-up question, but I could wait too.
Yeah, we can get through. We have a
Okay,
list here.
no worries.
and then
Nope, I could hold off on mine. Yeah.
So we had Julie next.
I didn't really have a question. I just wanted to thank the staff for their thorough and lengthy responses to the information requests. It took me quite a while to read through them, and I would imagine it took you quite a while answering them. And I think it's helpful to all of us on the budget committee. So I just wanted to do a shout out to the team and say thank you very much for your due diligence. It surely helped me understand a little bit better what all the issues are that are facing us. I thought about this. On the 186 FTE versus the 207 that's projected, where we keep spinning around in this conversation, are those all full-time FTEs and no part-time faculty is accounted for in that number?
That's correct, Julie. And we're just to, again, differentiate. Thank you for the shout out. We did work very hard on those, by the way. The 207, and there's actually went back and recounted. I heard the comments last time, and I spent a lot of time picking through our roster and all the data to make sure it was right. And there's some refinement there. It's 204 headcount, but the FTE is a little bit lower because not everybody's a full FTE. And I don't know what the FTE is off the top of my head, so it's slightly lower than that. But we do account for it, like I said, a higher number so we can keep up with the faculty floor, with strategic hires. We don't know when everybody's going to resign. There's no requirement for anyone to tell us when they're going to resign. So we budget a little bit higher, knowing that in our forecast, we're going to account for that in vacancy savings, which will be anywhere from 1 to 2 million. That's my ballpark guess. So does that answer your question, Julie?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, we had Steve next.
Thanks. Just a couple of comments and then a question. So my understanding is that it's not enough to have the reason that you're budgeting for 204 or whatever head count, I get that it's not the same in terms of FTE, is because you're contracted to have 186, if that turns out to be the precise number, on staff at any given time, not budgeted for, but actually on staff. And so you budget for an additional, whatever it is, 15 positions, knowing that whatever, somebody decides not to come at the last minute, somebody else retires, because at the end of the day, you're on the hook for who is actually on payroll, not who's budgeted for. So that's correct. A significant reason for that additional budget authority.
Right. And we've consistently, at least over the last 3 years that I've been here, have been budgeting it that way.
Yep. Okay. And then with regard to, the movement of positions, the way I generally understand it, it's a big complicated institution. We hire folks with various specialties. Specialty one, the aviation program or the drone program we've been hearing lots about is expanding. Maybe specialty two, I don't want to name one because we'll just leave it, it's contracting for any number of reasons and usually has been for a bunch of years. And so a decision has been made to eliminate a position. Not an easy thing to do, but we're going to constrict that program consistent with, roughly what we think the enrollment is to be. If that, the person who occupies that position has the specialty or the credentials to shift over to aviation, there's a potential that could happen. But those are separate processes. For the time, that can all work out. But at the time being, we're eliminating this one, we're expanding this other one. And that's why, to answer Austin's question, right, we can have those things happen simultaneously. We're reducing over here, we're expanding over there. And then the last question, this is the question, is can we think of a budget like at this point in time as a not to exceed document? That it doesn't mean that you will spend every penny that in the way in which you are presenting it to us now, but you're basically giving us a not to exceed, unless you came back with a request or something like that. Is that about right?
We could. Yeah.
So this gives you the flexibility to do up to X number of, amount of things, hire that many positions, move and shift in these kinds of ways. But then you'll adjust. I mean, that's the job of management to pay attention to the enrollments, to retirements, to state allocations, to any number of things to make the adjustments. So this is giving you the flexibility you think you need. It doesn't mean we're going to be $3.5 million in the hole at the end of the year because a lot has to happen before we get there.
That's right. So think of budget authority as our plan is not to exceed this. So we have 113 million-ish plugged into the general fund. We might not get all that revenue. The federal funding might fall through and we might not get it. And in that case, we'd have to come back to the board and figure out another option, right? About 15 minutes.
Dan, what's next?
Yeah, first I was wondering if it was possible to make a motion that we extend the meeting by 30 minutes. I don't know if that is something that we're allowed to do, but considering that we only give it an hour and 30 minutes is taken up by a presentation, it seems like there's a lot of questions that we have. I don't know what the body generally feels about that.
I feel like extending the agenda is beneficial for our discussion.
So I'll formally move that.
And I'll second it.
Do we have any? Sorry. Do we have any discussion? No. All right. Celia, yeah, do you want to call roll?
Kevin Alltucker,
Aye.
Denise Diamond,
Aye.
Larissa Ennis,
Aye.
Austin Fulnagi,
Aye.
Dan Isaacson,
Aye.
Charles Kimball,
Aye.
Steve Mattel.
Aye.
Zach Mulholland.
Aye.
Amber Patterson,
Aye.
Ron Preisler, Julie Wiesman,
Aye.
Jesse Williams.
Aye.
Are there
Thank
anything?
The question I had, just to start off with, was what is the current projected beginning of fund balance? Because that's different in different parts of the document. So we can get a kind of a baseline to start with, and then we can kind of grow from there. So.
I'll take that one. What we have a third quarter forecast that projects us at 7.5 million. However, there are other factors that affect your beginning fund balance that have everything to do with when accounting does reconciliation and what's due from tuition revenues, what's due from all of our other balance sheet accounts. So we anticipate there'll be a little bit of change between that and that, but it likely won't be any higher than what's built into the budget right now.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Charlie was next.
Yeah, I appreciate forecasts and budgets, right? They work together, but they have slightly different implications. But if we're thinking about this realistically, both of those I think are projecting a reduction in the carry forward. Is that correct? Correct. So if we're hearing the not to exceed, that not to exceed number, is the budget the $3.1 million differential, or is it the forecast as the $1.8 million differential?
The budget is 3.1.
Okay.
The forecast is one.
So I guess my question would be this: if we're going to budget to a known deficit, and that's a not to exceed, we're kind of putting ourselves in the hole to start with. And I think one of the questions been kind of kicked around is at what point do we actually try and attempt to get to a balanced budget so that we don't have the risk of spending over that or reduce the risk of spending over that?
Stealing my thunder, Kara.
I am stealing his thunder. Poor Jonathan. He's a great sport and has a great team.
Keeps taking over my meetings.
I know. He's not kidding. That's a great question. And as a finance person, you're spot on with what you're saying. And when I bring forward a financial forecast that's showing this slow depletion of our carry forward, that's concerning, right? So it's 100% something that has to be addressed. What this budget does is it gives us this not to exceed limit where we're going to spend, but we do absolutely have the task of operationally going back and reviewing this budget and digging through and combing each section of it, looking through each position, every decision that's made. That's why the president has the cabinet reviews every vacant position that we have before we post it. But we need more time to strategically look at this budget and make thoughtful decisions that don't impact enrollment, faculty, or staff in areas. Because one of the comments that is made is that, well, you really should have 85 positions empty. We have 35 positions empty on that roster. So if you tell us we should go back and cut $3 million, we are riffing staff. That's the concern. And so at this point, we're trying to be prudent for both staff and the college and saying we have to move forward with a budget. It is balanced. It does start to deplete the ending fund balance, which is a concern, but that's where we need more time. And that's why we presented a 4-year plan to the board to get this budget on track. Because the goal is, as we future focus, we don't spend more than we bring in a year. That's our goal, right? That's our baseline. We don't have enough time to make thoughtful decisions to present a budget today that will take out $3 million that will put that budget where you're saying. So this gives us a starting point with a lot of decisions to make and a big challenge ahead in the next 2 years.
Can I make one last comment on that?
Yeah.
So from our perspective, we don't have a lot of time to evaluate it either, right? We're looking at this over a 2 or 3 week cycle. And what's presented to us is to vote on something that at least some of us, I won't speak for the rest of the committee members, but I have a really hard time continuing. This is my second year on here to continue saying, yeah, let's go ahead and budget for a deficit. Because guess what? 25 is going to end up with a deficit. 26, we're going to end up with a deficit. We know that. At some point in time, we have to make that decision that either we take longer in budgeting or start it earlier or make some mandates at the board level that says we have to do this. And I'll
Yeah, Jonathan,
Well,
please, you go first.
Yeah, I hear you. And it's something that we're trying to be more thoughtful about too, to Kara's point, to be strategic. Keep in mind, we've already cut back 2.7 in the internal process. So to go deeper, we could either hamstring those programs that we're currently searching for, or like Kara said, we riff $3.5 million worth of people. And so this is a balancing act where this is a starting place. And I appreciate your comfort in reviewing it.
Your comments. We really, really appreciate your comments. I think I've heard those same comments every single year I've been here. It's my 3rd year. And, from my perspective, actually, you're sharing your comments with the Board of Education. And so everyone hears it. I hear it. Everyone hears it. And we will certainly be discussing your comments with the board.
So, Charlie. Austin. Had you circling around.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and Charlie, I agree with you. And the budget process started with the budget subdevelopment committee. So, this has been in discussion with faculty, students, classified professionals, and so forth. And again, what I'm kind of hearing is that there's a budget deficit for these FTEs, but that it's not a real one because tends to be an average vacancy of around 20, which kind of negates, and again, and this is why I feel like swirl has been kind of a part of our culture, unfortunately, for quite some time, because quite frankly, because of underinvestment in higher education for decades, this is kind of the accounting tools that we've had to use. So I guess I'm just a little confused as to why exactly we are going into, let's see, I'm trying to find the best words here for this. That why don't we just like go with the assumption that when positions open up, especially as we're doing these evaluations of these positions and essentially assessing the critical vacancies and so forth, why can't we just move forward with the recommended budget that the Budget Subdevelopment Committee gave us? And then as positions add on, we can then do a budget reconsideration of that aspect of the budget to add funds where necessary, because then we wouldn't be going into it with a deficit. So that's just my thought of how we could use that, since we're assuming these vacancy savings, but also not assuming them in the document. So yeah.
Yeah, I know. What I would add to that is what you're saying is reduce our budget to go down to a limit. But what we're doing is going down to a limit where we know we have filled positions, and now we're tipping into Oregon budget law. We're knowingly over allocating our budget right outside the gate. So we're giving you a budget that we think we can live within and strategically try to reduce what we need to spend out of that. But you're saying, hey, just reduce your budget to what the limit you think we could do. But we have to reduce people to get the budget down because personnel is 85% of what we're spending. So we couldn't keep everyone on staff and bring forward a budget that isn't sustainable with the staff we have. We would have to make decisions to get down to that level. So if the board and the budget committee wants us to reduce that by $3 million, then we have to go back to the board and make the decisions to get the budget to the $3 million reduction.
But it's not people in this situation, it's FTE. It's essentially vacant FTE.
It could be both, because what you saw in the forecast was, so you see in the budget, that's where I say there's a difference between the forecast and the budget document, right? So the budget document saying we're going to use over 3 million of our carry forward. What we gave you in the forecast next year says about 1.7 million because we're going to make up some in vacancy savings. But as you refine, so one of the comments was the underutilization rate is lower, but as we refine and lower budgets on everything, lower FTE availability, your underutilization rate and your vacancy savings rate are going to get lower. People are going to use their resources. I think we had, and the budget development process starts months before even BDS starts. We work with managers, we work with cabinet leaders, this is months and months. And up until the end, when we really look through the whole roster, what do you really need? Where are we really at? Where's enrollment? That's where those decisions have to be made. So we're strategically working through that. What we're saying is we need time to develop something that makes sense to continue to grow the college. That's the hard part. So we could absolutely just reduce the budget, but we have to proportionally figure out what we can actually afford in the budget.
Can I also add to that?
Yeah, please.
So there's also the other element of part-time and outside contracts. So because there's momentum with programs, there's students in the seats, we have
Excuse me,
momentum.
Jonathan. And just a point of personal privilege. Austin, can you move your microphone away from your mouth? I'm hearing your comments while Jonathan's speaking. And so over Zoom, it's getting a little wonky for me. So your voice is being picked up on your microphone. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Sorry, Jonathan.
That's okay. Okay. Thanks. When we have to, I'll use the example of a faculty member with reassignment time. They do some other good work, curriculum development, accreditation and whatnot. Often what happens is if that faculty member has a class, then we pull someone out of a part-time pool. So that's not technically vacancy savings. So because we're still utilizing part of what we would allocate to that faculty member to pay for them to do a thing, in fact, we're actually using more. So there's also the example of public safety. We're often down public safety officers. And so how we get to that to meet our requirements, we have an outside contract with a safety firm. I don't know what they're called, but we budget for a certain number of public safety officers. When they're not in the positions, we reallocate that to contracts to help us. So it squishes our vacancy savings a little bit. So in order for us to just reduce our budget, we don't have the time to do that right now. There's too much momentum moving forward with programming, with planning, with outside contracts for us to reduce it to the levels that we would need to that was presented.
But what about interfund loans? Interfund loans could be used as essentially a stopgap that we could use in the meantime. And that follows Oregon budget law, from my understanding.
We can use interfund loans, but they're to be paid back in the next year. So all that does is buy us a year. So if we have a carry forward, why not use your carry forward and then strategically plan? Because what we're doing is we're expelling too much, right?
So okay, got it. Thank you.
Let's see, we had Steve next.
Thank you. So I guess maybe it might be more of a comment or an expression of my understanding of things that throughout the course of the past year, right, you have been bringing the board a range of program proposals, right? We recently approved the expansion of the nursing program, right, to a 4-year degree. There's something similar happening with the business administration program. Those are things specifically that there were new the credit base, I can't think of the certification, sorry, and I'm not going to remember the names of them, but we have, received all of those over the course of the year, debated them, approved them, that kind of thing. Similarly, on the student services side, well, we need more of this or less of that. And similarly, we, see the increase in students, right? We get very excited when we get, 4, 5, 6% more students arriving this term over the similar term last year. And so what we don't see really until now is the budgeting to necessary to support all of that, right? So when we approve the RN the nursing program, you don't tell us at that point, okay, well, this means we're probably going to hire 5 more staff, and you'll see that in the budget, but that is what's happening at this point in time. So my sense of this whole thing is that this is in part, not entirely, but a reflection of board level, discussion and agreements with the president and staff over the course of the year. And at the end of the year, then you say, well, all these agreements and promises, et cetera, and also responding to the complexity of the numerous students who are showing up and what they want to do, right? They don't all just want to do the same thing. Some of them want to be here and some of them want to specialize there. And so your job is to say, based on all that input, these are the shifts that we think we need and the flexibility, right, the not to exceed in order to achieve it. And then you're telling us we think that's going to, push us $3 million more than what the budget development subcommittee approved. But this is your expertise and your responsibility to make those recommendations and those decisions. And you're simultaneously telling us, and in doing so, we will run out of money unless we make some changes structurally over the next 3 or 4 years. And so you're laying out that process for us as well. That's my understanding of where we're at. And it's not a fun place to be. Like you're telling us we need to spend more in order to meet all the objectives that we've agreed to this year. And here's the other things that we're going to need to do in order to bring our budget back in line.
That's exactly right. And this budget is a pivot. It's a runway to give us the opportunity to think about it as we move through the coming few months.
We had Dan next, and I did see your hand, Denise, so you'll be after Dan.
I guess I'm kind of echo what I've heard from Charlie and from what I've heard from Austin. A lot of this also comes down to faith and faith in a large degree of the federal government, which I don't have. And I don't know anybody in this room that would. And so if we're already starting from a position of an extreme deficit when 3 weeks ago, or I guess it would be 4 weeks ago, we were putting forth a budget. And I respect that you want us to project a budget that would not be in alignment, but at least at that time, it was in alignment that everyone was in agreement. So I'm confused as to what happened in 2 weeks that while everyone was in alignment, all of a sudden something has happened. So I'd like to know what that something is. But aside from that, if we're already starting from a deficit of now 1.7 million, and then the federal government comes in and eviscerates our funding, now we're even further in the hole because of what's happened. We have to go back to the drawing board. It seems to me the better appropriate approach would be a conservative financial position to do what the recommendation was 4 weeks ago. And if we need to nip and tuck where we need to, if we need to expand different programs because it's growing, great. But expanding to 10% labor increase to what the staffing levels were in 2012 when we had twice the enrollment population that we do now doesn't seem to be the most prudent option, especially given the uncertainty in the market. Can you piece all that together in some sort of coherent reply, please?
We have fun. We have fun every day, right? Eric comes in, I'm like, you got this. Good. It's a good question, and I appreciate it. It's so when we brought, I think you're referring to is the BDS budget that went to College Council, and that was April 9th, that we had a certain set of assumptions 6, 7 weeks ago. So we had that snapshot in time. And again, my job is continuous. It's dynamic. I get new inputs every day, and I do my best to kind of smooth it all together, blend it, help it make sense. And a couple of the assumptions that changed is we have financial audit happening with a lot of things that are perpetually changing. We have a lot of structural debts that we haven't paid over the years, and we have a new audit firm that's kind of bringing all this to light and things that we need to take care of. The other part of that too, the assumption was that we had that there was a thinking that what was in the roster was not entirely, well, the right word is not accurate. There were too many positions. And so I take that to heart. I spend a lot more time than I probably should digging through positions in our roster and the FTEs and making sure it's right. Every time I get a payroll run, I go and look through it. But what we're looking at is actually 600-ish people on our roster. And right now we only have 30 of them, 30 positions that are vacant that we need to hire in strategic areas where there is growth. So in order for us to go with that budget that was presented back then, to say that we want to freeze those positions, then we would essentially be hamstringing the programs that are doing well, that are serving a need, that have a lot of the students come in the door, they want to do this thing. So that's why the deans put together a list of hires that they want to do to keep growing their programs where they see the need. They're on the ground, they see it every day. We talk to them often, right? But we also know that there's a little bit of, we have to build a runway for us to address staffing positions as we go through the year. And that's an operational thing that we talk about often. And we already pulled back 2.7 million in what was asked for internally. In order for us to pull it back even further would actually be harmful to the institution at this point. So it's a matter of looking at what the impacts are to go with a set of assumptions that was 6, 7 weeks ago versus now. And I hear your point. I don't have much faith in the federal government right now. I also oversee grants, and I'm a little bit worried. So we're looking at it very closely. I'm looking at all the listservs. But this budget gives us the ability to continue to have that conversation of strategically, what are we doing well? What do we want to be as an institution? And how to plan for that in the next coming months. So, Kara.
Can I do a quick follow-up?
Yes.
Quick. Yeah. Charlie and I are both business owners. And the part that is still, it just doesn't sit well with me is that if my division managers, I'm sure Charlie would echo this, came to me and said, this is what we want for our division. Just because they want it doesn't mean necessarily that I have the ability to do it, especially if I'm trying to budget out. And even if it hurts the institution a little bit, as opposed to putting us in a deficit that hurts the whole institution as a whole, I'd rather hurt a department than the institution as a whole. And so to me, the fact that different division heads want something isn't a material factor, at least as far as I look at the calculus and when I look at the whole board. That's the way I look through it anyway.
That's fair, but I don't think it would hurt the institution a little bit. To go deeper would hurt the institution a lot at this point. And I think that in order to do that, we would need to turn around and make immediate decisions that might not be thoughtful.
Yeah, and just to add to that, to Steve's point that he had just made, there's programs that are in play that are on this list to hire. The Bachelor of Nursing program, we have respiratory therapy, we have commitments to the community with Peace Health to bring in some positions that require other positions. And so to say what you're saying means we're not going to do these programs at all in some of those areas. And this is where strategically, the president has great vision of, we need to go look at the areas of the college that we're continuing to grow because we rely on students being here. And without growing the programs that students want to be in, we will continue to not have positive enrollment. So we have to keep looking at those areas and make the right, and I keep saying strategic, but I don't know of a better word. Like we can't not continue to grow nursing because that's an area that is full. They have 100% capacity of all their students. There's not many programs in the college that has that. And I'm not picking on any of the other programs. I'm just saying they're great programs. So please don't take offense. Anybody, aviation's also full. There's probably tons of them. Okay. They're all great. But there's areas that we know will be full, will be growing, and that we are the community's college. So we also have that community benefit that we look at. And that's one of the programs that we need in this area. We need nurses. We need to have, we need flight, and it's apparently a great program, but you get my point.
Yes. Yep. Thank you.
All right, Denise, you are next.
Thank you. To follow along with some of these concerns about program, I think it's important to get the math of it in front of us. And by that, I mean, how many students, an FTE, do we have to have in order to substantiate, so to say, a position? These partnerships are, and programs that students want are very important. But I come from a place where I also understand that nursing programs, just as an example, I'm not talking about Lane, okay, lose money, okay? And so the partnerships that are possible perhaps in the community, the funding of a nursing chair or different elements like that become incredibly important in order to balance out what the actual cost is and how many students it actually takes to balance out what that cost factor is. So I think I would appreciate having that kind of information. You want to grow a program by a certain amount, you're going to hire a couple people, that has a cost factor with salaries, benefits, et cetera. Just how many students would need to be in that program to make that a stable type of investment. And that way, I think that it helps us not to get too ahead of ourselves, not because these programs aren't worthwhile, not because we get very excited when we hear about these programs and certificates, and we ask great questions, and we're very enthusiastic of supporting the faculty and staff that are very talented and enthused about these things. But we have to, of course, balance it out. And one of the ways that I'm familiar that colleges have done this is also to build on the certificate programs that provide stepping stones to more complete programs. So you can get students in, a lot of FTE, and it's a shorter term program. So anyway, that is a part of my concern. And if I remember the document correctly, and I'm sorry, I'm not calling out a page, just as the last comment, I believe that manager salaries were the higher point on the graph on it. And I think we have to take a look at the balancing act of all essential personnel at the college. And we may not be able to do all the personnel vacancies that maybe are hoped for in order to balance out this budget. Thank you.
Sorry, can I
Go
jump in with
Yeah.
just one clarifying thing? I just wanted to clarify, the budget committee is here to ask questions about the numbers, the budget, the funding allocations. And while I personally want to give you guys ideas on how to do this, that's really not what you're looking for from the budget committee. So as far as like ideas and things on how to figure out how to fix this, that's up to admin, not the committee, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, that was one of my comments. Operationally, that is a discussion that the president will have to have. And there's a lot of things that you're saying, Denise, that are conversations that operationally we do need to look at and review, and that we are, and that's what we also need time to do. And I just want to add a caveat that when we talk about management positions, of the 79 we have budgeted, 22 of those are not funded with general fund. And they're here for specific purposes, like the radio station, like grants, and like other areas. So I just want people to keep in mind that there's other areas that have things that they have to have on staff to do that. And without managers, things don't flow either. And it's definitely an operational decision that Dr. Bulger is challenged with. And this whole financial picture, this entire team is going to be challenged with looking at it.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I
Vice
just
Chair,
ask
for,
a clarifying question about the KLCC? Because I was the person that went there. And I think I'm a little confused as to, I thought at some point in the year there was, they're doing something that separates themselves from LCC. Did I misunderstand that?
Trustee Diamond, I'm hoping that we can answer that question outside of this meeting. I think they've got about, 2 minutes left in the
Sorry.
extension. So we'd be happy to answer that question though for you. So what I was going to say though is about the budget committee and that we're basically not making this up. There's a whole document that you probably have seen about what the budget committee is, what its roles and responsibilities are. So thank you, Vice Chair, for putting a fine point on that.
We just had a couple names left. Yeah, we're going
Point
to
of order. I
30 or
believe we extended
6:15?
for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
30 minutes.
Okay, excuse me. Thank you.
Okay, so we have 4 in the queue here: Steve, Austin, Julie, and then Zach. So Steve, if you want to go first.
Question: if we were to go with the budget, the budget development subcommittee submitted, and that was changed, that they submitted, right? So we'd have greater reserves, right? So we would achieve that much. But I think what I'm hearing from you is that without the adjustments that you're proposing, we would put ourselves in a situation where students that we had been recruiting, marketing to for a range of programs would show up next fall and not necessarily be able to get into those very classes because we hadn't hired people to teach those classes. And likewise, students in potentially under-enrolled programs would show up and with a big expansive classroom before them. And so we would have a misalignment if we went with budget A over budget B, right? Is that a roughly accurate thing to say?
That's correct.
So we would be doing our students a disservice, right? Based on current students and future students, right? Students we have that we hope to recruit to come based on all of our research, et cetera, and the programs we're developing and putting in place and that we've approved here. So there's some risk in that, as Dan points out. Well, that extends us beyond perhaps our means. I get that. And there's certainly some concern, and I have the similar concerns, I think maybe similar to lots of folks about, well, what happens if the federal government does X, Y, and Z to us? And so so my question is, well, A, I think, right, we're here for the students. I am certainly, I think most people are. We want to be ready for that student population to serve them in the way that they intend to meet their needs. What would it look like then if we were to do all of that and say, we need to increase our reserve against any number of unforeseens that might come our way next year? What if we wanted to say, do all of that and give us a, whatever it is, multi-million-dollar reserve to protect us against unforeseens?
That's a great question. And keep in mind, even freezing the positions we have, if we freeze all the 35 positions we have out there that are vacant right now, for example, there's finance positions that would be a problem, right? And there's a range of them. But what could end up happening if you're cutting the areas you're talking about, our enrollment decreases. And that's also what adds to our reserve. So there's a spot where we start losing revenue, like we want to bring in the right kind of students. So you can't make the assumption, even if we cut all those 35, 15 of which are faculty, that we would continue to build up our reserves because we wouldn't necessarily have the students that we're projecting to have.
There's just a quick follow-up. If we were to simply say we want to be ready for the student body that we anticipate arriving next fall, right, which requires some new positions to be hired, all of that stuff's been discussed, and we wanted to maintain a full-blown reserve, right? We don't want to dip into that reserve to the tune of a couple $2 million this year. I think what that means, that's what would impose austerity, right? Is that right? That would be the thing that would, if we said we want that, the only way you could deliver that to us is to cut much, much deeper into staff, faculty, staff, classifieds than you're currently proposing. Is that true?
Correct. Yes.
Austin?
Absolutely. First off, I want to thank also the staff at the finance department and also our cabinet and so forth. Look, I just wanted to point these facts out really quick. So we have 70 FTE managers scheduled right now, with 80 scheduled for next year. So 14% increase and a $1.7 million increase to that budget. But out of all those managers, 22 of them does not come out of the general fund. And so out of that $1.7 million, how much of that is actually coming out of the general fund? If we don't have an answer to that, that's perfectly fine. It's just, I wanted to put a point on this because when we were talking to students about tuition increases, one of the concerns that those students had was, okay, yes, protect my wraparound services, keep our faculty and so forth, but I'm just worried about if there's going to be additional management positions that my tuition increase is going to be paying for. That was a concern that students came up to us about. So that's why I'm putting a fine point on those increase of FTE of managers. I'd love to know what those are. Love to know how much of those is coming out of the general fund and so forth. With faculty, if we have strategic plans and so forth for those positions, great, awesome. I'm wondering about that. I have that same question though with those management positions. So
I think I can get that.
I appreciate it.
Information request.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
Okay, Julie, you are next.
I just realized that I have only heard from 2 people on the budget committee that are not board members. And your job, as we were reminded, is to ask questions and, informative. And I actually would like to hear your voice before we leave in 10 minutes. If you did have questions that might be informative, that might be helpful to us in helping us make our decisions instead of having the board talk to each other. So I just wanted to encourage.
Jesse and I were holding ours for last, as is protocol for chair and vice. So we wanted to give everybody else an opportunity to speak before we did. That kept chopping us down as we went along. But I'm happy to share my thoughts with you. Really appreciate all the information, not only from Jonathan and crew, but also hearing from Jim and Adrian. It's a lot of information for all of us to absorb and be asked to weigh in on in a short amount of time. So I do appreciate the work for you that you have put in. I also really understand, I'm a CFO, so I do all numbers, but I'm covering off on our CEO right now, and she looks more strategically in the future. And it's opened my eyes to how those two can really contradict each other sometimes, because you have to spend to grow, but you also have to be prudent. So my thoughts on it are, I do feel a little nervous with, approving a budget with a projected. It just goes against all of us in business, and I understand that a college and public accounting is very different from private, but it would be nice to see or hear, I don't want to know operations. Obviously, that's not our goal here, but I do have a concern about that and would love to hear what, you say you go through the year. So we're here for 4 weeks and then we leave. And then I'm hearing that throughout the rest of the year, you'll make tweaks to this and get it to balance. And we're just kind of expected to be like, okay, and that's fine, but it's also, our names and our reputations for approving this absolutely wonderful college. I grew up in a town where the college was cement, and in an old rundown grocery store. So this is a beautiful campus. I would love to see it survive. So I guess my thought was, instead of making adjustments as you go, is there anything, sooner rather than later that you could compromise on with your budget that you received 4 weeks ago and this one? So those, you don't have to answer that right now. But those are just kind of my thoughts as I sit here and listen to really great input from Austin, Dan, Charlie. So I'll hand it over to Jesse so you can hear from him too. Thanks, Julie, for bringing that up.
Yeah, thanks, Amber. So I started out in the private sector, so I definitely feel like I know where people are coming from up here saying that we can't continue operating in the red. more recently, I've been in the kind of not-for-profit space and have come to learn that sometimes you have to make decisions that that aren't the most fiscally straightforward in order to keep the institution going. So I guess I kind of think of it as like an apple tree. So, you've got an apple tree, it produces apples. If you come through and cut down the apple tree for wood, then you have no more apples. And so I feel like that's what I'm hearing from you, is that there are these strategic things that need to be done. And I get that. On the flip side, to be completely frank, I don't want to get to 2029 and have people say, man, it's a bummer that Lane Community College isn't around anymore. And you were on the budget committee that started this whole thing. So I'll be real honest with you. It feels like I understand where you're going through, what you're going through. And I think generally, I don't want to speak for other people. I suspect that other people understand too. It's just they don't have the confidence that if we sign off on a $3 million deficit, that won't materialize. And that's nothing personal, but I think like Amber said, we're only here a month. So we have to find some way to get the confidence level up within ourselves to be able to put our names on it. Otherwise, we're kind of part of the problem.
Chair, if I could jump in here. This reminds me, this conversation, really appreciate this, reminds me of my first year as spring of 2023 was the first budget season that I went through. And you might recall, the board members who were on the board at the time, that's when we were introduced the reserve for revenue shortfall, because of the very reason that Jesse's talking about. So this structural imbalance is not new. It's not new to Lane. It's not new to community colleges. It's not new in higher education. And so we are addressing it. I feel really confident in this team and in the collaborations that we have with everyone in the institution. So I really feel really confident. But if the budget committee wants to also recommend to us that we set aside some funds, then we would need to do additional work, just as we did in 2023, to have that decision made and approved by the board in June. And then we start to go through a process of reducing so that we're setting aside those funds just in case the enrollment numbers don't come in, just in case we have alternate scenarios. So, but if that's the recommendation from the budget committee, then we will certainly take that very seriously, and that's approved by the board. We'll take it seriously. So your lack of confidence is not new either, because I think that every single year we have the same kind of reaction.
We only have a few minutes, and I know Julie made a good comment about did Ron or Larissa, did you want to?
Yeah, I'll share some
you know,
thoughts. So thank you for all of the work that you've done last year and this year. It's so interesting to see the budget document evolve as you all get more comfortable with and familiar with the work, and as you kind of put your own mark on it. My background is in higher education administration, and so I am more comfortable with the kind of flex space that is represented by those FTE kind of openings that are budgeted for, knowing that at the end of the day, the leadership team and the executive staff are on the hook for making this organization run and continue. I also, though, share that concern about spending down the carry forward, the ending fund budget. In this moment, I'm not ready to make a request or anything specific, but I do have a question, which is, under Oregon budget law, what is the required timeline for the approval of the budget? And what time do you think you need to answer some of the meatier, more concerning questions that might get us to the place of confidence?
It's a great question. So Oregon budget law requires us to technically pass a budget before July 1st. But the way that our board works is that we have one meeting at the beginning of each month where they can make executive decision, which is June 4th. That's why we have these meetings in May, so we can lead up to that. There's also a little bit of public notice that we have to give to. It's called a CC1 that we put out in the public that says, here's our recommended budget for adoption. And there's a little bit of time constraint there. But I would say that we're on the last week and a half of where we would have to approve a recommended budget in order to meet the timeline for the board to approve it on June 4th.
I see.
Yeah, we lost Ron. We're also pretty much out of time too. Thank you, everybody. That's great. So I'm going to move on to closing items. I want to remind everybody of our upcoming dates if necessary. Public comment will also be accepted at these meetings. So next Wednesday, the 21st at 5 p.m. And then Wednesday, May 28th at 5 p.m. And then June 4th at 6 p.m. where the board will adopt the budget and appropriate funds. So with that, the meeting is adjourned.